Oh yeah, man, that looks absolutely awesome. Hey guys, it's Cam here, welcoming you to another episode of The Build Room. In this week's episode, we're continuing the rust repairs on Violet Crumbles, and we've got some cool new tools to play with. So stick around and check it out. Okay, so in the last Violet Crumbles episode, we had got that dog leg repaired to about 90%, and there was that small section of the wheel arch that we just didn't get time to do, and I ran out of sheet metal. But the little break that we've had has given me time to do two things. Firstly is get more sheet metal, and then the second one is to pick up some more tools that might help us with finishing out that repair with a little bit more finesse than we've done so far. Now, I picked up a set of Metal Master shrinker stretchers. Now, this is what I would consider a fairly cheap entry point into the world of shrinking and stretching. This is two separate units, one for shrinking and one for stretching, and it was about $250 from Hare & Forbes here in Perth. You can get cheaper units. You can get a single unit with two sets of jaws that you have to swap in and out whenever you want to switch from shrinking to stretching, and I think they run online maybe 170, 180 bucks in Australia. I'm sure it's much cheaper for the US and UK audiences to pick up this stuff, but we have Australia tax. So yeah, pretty cheap, and the reason I was willing to spend that little bit extra to get the two units is switching back and forwards between tools and having to reconfigure them really does slow you down. It takes the fun out of the job a little bit. I have multiple grinders and multiple drills and things like that for the reason that I can set them up for specific tasks before the job and then just blow through it. So this is one of the two units. This is the shrinking unit. It's just got some arrows on the jaws that show you whether it's the shrinker or the stretcher. And all I've done to this is just made a simple RHS bracket here so that I can just drop it into the vise and do it up. And it'll enable me to switch between these pretty quickly. I can also move them around the shop easily if I do want to use them somewhere else. So yeah, I'm excited to see what we can do with those. And the other thing that I got was the set of bending brake jaws for the vise. So if we look at these up close, so this is basically two jaws that just have magnets on the back to drop onto the vise. And once they're in place, you just use the vise to crush the two together, and that will bend up to a 90-degree angle on up to 1.2 mil steel, I think it was. It also has these Allen keys here, and what you can do with that is just remove sections of the brake. So if you're trying to bend up a pan or something that isn't 150 mil wide, what would happen is, as you go to bend it up, if you've got two corners bent on a 90-degree angle, you'll end up crushing it. So you can take out a finger, or say one of the smaller ones or whatever, shrink the distance here, and then as you fold it up, the pan will sit on either side. This is a real basic unit, obviously. We're not going to be fabricating amazing stuff with this, but when it comes to doing things like the 90-degree bends for wheel arches, which is probably the one we'll look at in this episode, I think this will be really handy and it'll get the job done. So yeah, they're the new toys. We'll look at them in more detail throughout the episode, but for now, let's take a look at the car and see where we're at. Okay, so looking at the dog leg area, we can see the repairs that we've done in the last episodes. If you haven't watched those episodes, I'd recommend going back and watching them. I'll put a link above, just so that you know where we're at before we start in on this piece here. And this piece, I'm hoping that we can do a little bit differently using the shrinker stretcher and the bending brake. And I am going to take the advice that I gave in the last episode, which was ideally fix the outer layers before you cut them off the car. So I have this hole here. I have the original piece of metal that came from there, and what I'm actually going to do is weld it back into place and then start my repair at that point as if I'd never cut it out, ideally. There's a couple of advantages here that I've got in cutting it out though. So firstly, I've been able to just go on the flip side of it and grind it back to make sure I know exactly where the rust is that I have to cut off. Luckily, that means for at least half of this, I'm going to be able to keep everything that's in this section of the arch, and all I have to replace is this and this piece down here, which is where the shrinker stretcher is hopefully really going to shine. The pieces that are a bit further down, well, we're just going to have to do the best that we can. What I'll probably do is use the shrinker stretcher to make the arch section first and then fill in the gaps that are in this section here. So let's get this welded in place and then we'll see where we're at. Okay, so that is tacked in place. It doesn't look too bad. The only real issue is down here. there is a raised area here as it comes up to meet the flare, or the wheel arch, whatever you want to call it, which is not as great as the actual arch should be. It should stick out more. So I'm not really sure what happened there. This is a new piece of sheet metal here. I would imagine that the piece that I cut out was either rusty around here and I just couldn't make out how big a angle that was supposed to be, or when I was taking it off, I'd sort of bent it down a bit and bent it into a shape that was less than what it should be. But anyway, what I might do there is sort of just cut down here and then bend this out to meet this area. And then all I'll do is then cut along here and bend this out a bit as well. Because I do want this to be the right shape flare. So what I can do is compare it with the other side of the car just to make 100% sure. So let's get back up to the workbench, break out some sheet metal and the shrinker stretchers and see what we're working with. Okay, so we've got our piece of metal for the arch, we've got our center line marked in it. It's a bit rough cut, but that'll be fine. We're gonna have to adjust it on the car anyway. And now we're gonna try and bend it in the vise. All right, so yeah, that doesn't look too bad. There are marks in it, obviously, from me hammering it on here and from the actual brake itself. But shrinker stretchers put a lot of tooling marks in their metal when you use them anyway, so it's not like it's gonna be a problem on the finished product, I don't think. Now, let's go see what we're gonna do with this, and I wanna show you that on the passenger side of the car, because we still have a workable lip there. Okay, so we've got the wheel arch here, and we need to replace from, what, about there to about here, and we have a straight piece of metal which we've angled to get the arc here. And it's not a perfect corner, but neither is this. Okay, and that's actually one of the things of when I was bending metal over the vise, I was getting a very sharp corner on it. I'm glad this one doesn't give you as sharp a corner, because the problem being is when the sharp corners, you have to grind them down, which means you thin out the metal. So at least this will mean this will be stronger as it goes in. But obviously, that ain't gonna work at all for two reasons. Firstly is, obviously we're not matching that arc, all right? That's a bit of a no-brainer, but also this has an arch out. So it starts in close and then it moves out as it comes up. So we're gonna have to adjust this on two different planes. So to conform this straight piece to here, we'll use the stretcher along this outside face. And then to get it to curve with the car, curve inwards, we'll use the shrinker down this end. First time I've ever shrunk or stretched metal, so this is new to me and I'll be learning along with you guys, but I have done a bit of research on the theory and I'll just jump out to the whiteboard now and I can take you through why we need to stretch this side and shrink this side. Okay, so I'm representing this in 2D and really you don't have to worry about the third dimension of it at the moment. Let's pretend this didn't exist and it was just a flat piece of steel. So if we've got a flat piece of steel like this, these stretcher jaws are going to stretch the metal and they're going to stretch it more at the outside edge than they are on the inside. That's just the way the jaws will work. So if you think about it being two separate pieces of metal, or I don't know, the wheels on a car as you're doing a burnout, whatever you want to do, this outside edge, if you lengthen it more than this edge, what it's going to do is tend to bow the metal in that direction. Okay, because that is a longer line than that, right? So even with this piece at the bottom, if you think about, if we cut through here right now and took this off, I'd be able to bend that piece pretty much as easy as I please into the shape to conform to the arch. It's this one that we need to put the shape into. So we're just gonna stretch along this edge here and we're gonna see where it gets us. So let's go have a look at the jaws of the stretcher to actually get a better idea of how that mechanism of stretching works. All right, so these are the jaws. You can see that if I open them up, you've got a bottom jaw and a top jaw, and those are actually split down the middle of each. Now, when they come together, picture them grabbing onto a piece of metal between them, and then they literally just pull apart, and they just pull the metal as if it was taffy to expand it out and stretch it. All right, and if we just take this 0.9mm offcut, we'll see how much difference this can make. Into the vise, pop it in. That's just with one pass. You can already see that we're getting quite a curve on this. If we run it through again, probably get even more on it. All right, so just with 2 quick passes, we've managed to get quite a curve on this. If I hold it up against this, which is relatively flat, there you go. We've got quite an arch there going on. So now we're looking to have the exact same arch on this portion of the metal. So that's going to go on the guard, and we need that curve to it. And to make sure that I can bend this with some semblance of consistency and evenness, what I'm going to do is, these jaws are about a 40mm jaw. I'm just going to mark this all the way along so that I know that I can put the same pressure on the handle, or try to exert the same force on the handle. And if I do an evenly spaced number of stretches, then I will get roughly the same curve. Now, I don't think the wheel arch is a consistent curve all the way through, but at least if I'm starting with a consistent curve, I can then identify the few areas that I might need to increase the stretch to get it to fit. So let's mark this out and have a go. The only thing that really strikes me in terms of advice that I've seen other people give on how to use these things is to just work a little bit at a time, which means I will run through with a very light stretch here first. I'll put it up against the body. I'll see how it's playing out, and we'll just go little by little until we get it to the shape that we need, because you don't want to start overstretching this and then having to shrink it back and then go back and forwards, because all you're going to do is fatigue the metal and obviously waste a lot of time and effort. So yeah, slow and steady wins the race, I think, on this one, and we'll see how we go. All right, so we're starting to see a curve there. It's quite mild, but that was to be expected. This obviously isn't gonna fit, but I'm just gonna fit it on the car so I can try to gauge how much more it's gonna need. Actually, that's more than I thought it would be on the car, but maybe we're a half to a third of the way there. So I'm gonna go and do a second set of stretches, and this time I'm not gonna do it in between the lines. I'm gonna do it directly in the middle of the lines, so that we're, again, making this curve as even as possible, and then we'll come back. Funnily enough, that looks like about double the curve. So again, let's take it back to the car. Man, that is getting pretty close. I mean, I'd almost say that's where we need to be. Possibly a little bit tighter in here. I mean, if we look at the larger arch for a second, that fits almost perfectly, apart from obviously the forward and backwards bend. But honestly, that is so close. I think I might need to stretch this out a bit more just to bring this angle down a bit more sharply. Then we have to deal with this side. And obviously I need this to be there and for this end to tuck in, which means we've got to bring that back in so it sucks in against the body. And we're going to try and make up this line here where these areas don't meet. So yeah, wait here for a sec, I'll be right back. All right, so one more turn later and we got there. It's all lining up sweet, and we've still got heaps more here on the bottom. So our next problem is the angle here. So this is the gap now that we have to close. So I'm gonna start shrinking in this area, probably start about here at my second mark, because we're pretty flat here, so I don't want to start shrinking this. So I'll start shrinking up here, and hopefully we'll just be able to flow it down into there. And I'm hoping that won't be too hard, because if you think about this shape, even with this curve cut into it, if I was to slice this piece off, I'd still be able to flex that up and down and bow it, you know, pull this end up without any hassle whatsoever, because it's still just 0.9mm still. It's only this that gives it strength. So as we stretch this, there shouldn't be too much resistance from that. And what I'm hoping is we don't get too much deflection overall, because I don't want to start shrinking it here and have it adjust this angle. But anyway, we won't know until we try. Quick change. The only thing I'm worried about here is that with this curve, it will sort of flatten it as it shrinks, but we'll see. All right, so we're starting to get a curve. You can see that coming inwards there. It's a good sign. I'll try it on the car. Okay, definitely needs a lot more. So I'm gonna actually go the halves again. Like I said, I want to keep this stretch even. It's looking a bit better. Let's go try that on the car. Okay, so we've got a couple of little helping hands here holding the metal in place, and it's really easy now to see just how well this piece is fitting. Even if we take a look inside the arch, it looks like it was always meant to be there. And if we flip to the other side, you can see it's tucking in the way we want it to, and it's sitting just a little bit proud at the bottom to make up for that area that I need to go back and change. So what I'm going to do now is just trim the width of this flange to match the rest of the arch, tack it in place, then go about patching all the other areas that still need sheet metal. I've got a trick up my sleeve for the templating on this one, so make sure you're paying attention in the montage. Okay, so everything is in and it's looking really good. So if we look at it from this angle, you can see the curve of the wheel arch. It's exactly where it needs to be. That feels smooth all the way through, even though we've still got, you know, little gaps where the metal's not filled in yet. That feels like it's the perfect angle. And then if we look on the other side, you can see this angle through here is perfect as well. That's there's no ridge there, there's no change in the angle, you know, it's not stepping in or out as it crosses this boundary. And then as it comes down the bottom here, it's got a small twist in it to bring it in line with the bottom quarter panel, and that's the same on the other side. And then if we look down here at the bottom of the panel, you can see where I cut in here and I move the panel out slightly just to meet this. And again, that's a good line. It looks a little bit funky because there's some weird weld on the here where I spot welded it. But as I grind that off, like fully weld this in and grind that off, that will be nice and smooth and in line with the arch as well. And basically all I need to do now is to bend out this piece of metal so that it meets up with this, and then tack it all through there as well. But that is going to be easier in the next stage. And that next stage, because we've got all of this structurally sound now, is to unzip these tack welds, pull the entire bottom of the dog leg and this top piece off together. We'll take it over to the bench, we'll fix the few little bits that need fixing, we will finish weld everything, we'll bend this bit out and sort that out as well. And then we'll paint this whole section, and we'll also probably have to touch up the paint here because the heat will damage it. And then we'll bring it back over, be really careful about how we get it back in place for the final time, and then we'll fully weld it up, grind it back, and we'll see what the finished product's gonna look like. So stick around for one more time lapse and we'll check back in when we're done. right, so we are done, and I gotta say, that looks absolutely awesome. All of the transitions between the cut points are all nice and level. They're not 100% smooth because I have been grinding in there with like 40 grit sandpaper, but the main thing that I was worried about, which is this section here, is nice and smooth all the way along. The transitions back into here are all still good. And basically, if we take a look down the side of the panel, you can also see how clean that arch is. The light reflecting off it, I guess, makes it look a little bit wonky. But yeah, this is all pretty good through here. So yeah, there's a little bit more work that's going to need to be done through here when I go to fill it and paint it. But other than that, I am super happy with how this has come out. So let's jump back to the bench and talk about what we've learnt. Okay, so we are done with that repair, and I'm absolutely stoked with the way it came out. Couldn't be happier for my first shot at repairing something of that magnitude, and that's pretty much the worst section of rust on the entire Violet Crumbles. So I feel like I've sort of made it to the top of the mountain, and hopefully it's smooth sailing from here on out. There's definitely going to be more rust. I just think it's not going to be as intimidating when I get to it. So yeah, what did I learn through the episode? The first thing would be that shrinkers and stretchers are pretty awesome pieces of kit. I'm already thinking of a whole bunch of different things that I can put them to work on Violet Crumbles and some of my other project cars, especially things like the areas in the boot where you've got to get that siltus in and it always rusts out and they're really hard to fabricate on the corners and stuff. So I really think I'm going to be able to get some value out of what I've invested into those tools. The second thing would be the revised approach that I'd recommend, which is, again, repair the outer skin before you cut it off. Don't do what I did and start cutting away and having a ball and going on an expedition to see how bad the rust is. It was fun and it probably made for hopefully what you think is a good video, but realistically I should have repaired that outer skin before I put it off the car. Would have made my life a lot easier. The other thing would be, you'll notice I said I was going to take that skin off and bring it over to the bench and fill weld all of the areas that were pieced together. I actually changed my mind. I did it while it was on the car. Again, for the same reason. While it's on the car and it's welded in and it's under tension, when you're welding, it's less likely to buckle and warp. It still did that a little bit, and when I put it on, there was a little bit of bending and finagling that I had to do, but we got there in the end, and as I said, super happy with the result. Oh, and finally, get yourself some copper primer. Here you can see the black caliper paint, which is flaking off due to the heat of the welding. But underneath it, there's still a perfectly good layer of copper primer. It's fantastic stuff. So yeah, that was a 3-episode mission, and I appreciate you guys sticking with me through it. If you liked it, please hit that like button below, subscribe if you haven't, and feel free to comment below and say what you think. And as usual, if you're new to the channel, I'd recommend you watch the full Violet Crumbles series, which I'll link to here, and also maybe check out the A90 series if you haven't seen that one. I don't know. Other than that, I just want to say thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Build Room. Bye for now.